Welcome to the Beavercreek Tactical Podcast. Here we discuss everything from the Second Amendment to personal protection. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. And please, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in iTunes. Go to www.mcpropnet.com/Beavercreek Tactical Podcast for more information.
All right. Hey, this is Merle Cox with Beavercreek Tactical Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. As you know, we're rebranding, so we're making some changes on the Facebook page and the YouTube channel. So today what I thought I would do is sit down and actually talk to someone who I believe is a pistol aficionado. He's one of the greats, and I've been following him for many years on YouTube and several other media platforms, Mr. Dave Spaulding. Dave, thanks so much for joining me today.
They're more than welcome. Glad to be here.
Yes. Sorry, we had some technical difficulty, so this is take two, but everything seems to be working fine now, so we'll start over. And Dave, as I've mentioned now 2 or 3 times, the people that I deal with and I will deal with are new to the shooting community. So they probably don't know you or never heard of you because you, unlike me, are somebody who, I think you're a next level instructor. I told you I'm an NRA basic pistol instructor. So the people I meet are new. The people that probably you deal with a lot are people who actually, what I'll say, take their carrying a gun more seriously than a lot of people do, because you offer advanced classes. But I want my people that I know and that I train to know you, and hopefully they will seek you out and search you out in order to get some additional training. Because like I said to you earlier, you know, the people that I deal with, they come, they take our class. It allows them the opportunity to submit for a CCW in the state of Ohio, and then they never take training again. And I think that's a mistake. But we'll talk more about that later, because I'm sure you can expand on that, and you've probably dealt with some of the same people that I've dealt with there. So to get started off, though, I want people to have a little background. You have 36 plus years as a Leo, or you were doing some federal security experience. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure. It's kind of the in thing in the combative firearms community now to be former special operations or whatever. And I was never in the military, never wanted to be in the military. And I'm not trying to disparage those folks. They're absolutely essential. They're awesome. But since I was a child, I always wanted to be a cop. And I dropped out of college at the end of my junior year, gave up a track and field scholarship to enter the Sheriff's Academy here in Dayton, Ohio. Now, I did finish. If I hadn't have finished, I think my mother would have had a stroke. Right. But I did finish, went on and got a master's degree, so I fulfilled the educational side. But I went into law enforcement because it was what I really wanted to do. And because I was a law enforcement officer, the primary weapon that I have focused on now for 4 decades has been the handgun, because the handgun has been, always will be, the primary weapon of law enforcement. You know, the AR-15 carbine is certainly growing in popularity in the law enforcement community, and I'm glad of that. But you're not going to carry an AR-15 into somebody's house on a domestic dispute. It's not going to happen. You know, the handgun is not necessarily effective. It's convenient. It's concealable. It's carryable. Thus, it will always be the primary weapon not only of law enforcement, but of the legally armed citizen. The downside of the handgun is it's also the hardest platform to shoot well. You can get somebody shooting an AR-15 carbine really well pretty fast, but it's not convenient to carry. During my law enforcement career, I worked in a wide variety of assignments. The great thing about the sheriff's office in Dayton is it was big enough to have a wide variety of assignments. It was small enough that you didn't get swallowed up like you would, say, at a 10,000-man law enforcement agency. I started out dispatching cars. I worked in the jail. I hated working in the jail, but I realized now, looking back on it, it gave me an opportunity to know my opponent unlike anything else. I mean, within the military, intelligence is supreme. I mean, it's everything. You want to know your enemy. And the times that I worked in the jail and I transported prisoners back and forth to institutions and talking to those folks, I learned more about them than many police officers should. And the one thing I can tell your viewers in the hopes that maybe they'll take their training more seriously, is that though everybody worries about ISIS and Al Qaeda and all that, you're much more likely to be attacked by someone who's trying to get their next drug fix than you are by a terrorist. And that you need to understand that they don't think like you do. They're interested in committing whatever crime it is and getting away. And if you are hurt or killed while they commit that crime, well, then so be it. It's not personal. It's just what they need to do. So gave me the opportunity to learn about these folks. And then, I worked patrol. I was a crime scene technician. I was both a property crime and violent crime detective. I spent some time undercover. I worked in a surveillance unit where we actually tried to catch criminals in the act of committing crimes, which was kind of interesting. Ran a multi-jurisdictional drug task force for 5 years that had local, state, and federal agents. We literally worked cases from Miami to Seattle because drugs had no boundaries. So I had a wide range of assignments. When I retired, I took a job working for a security contractor doing security within the United States, mostly court security, securing courthouses and federal judges. And when I could not take government service anymore because watching state, local, federal governments take our tax money and just waste it, I couldn't take it anymore. So I had to get out. I still had to make a living. So my wife told me, she says, hey, you've always wanted to do this training thing, because the vast majority of my life I've spent training cops, not armed citizens. The legally armed citizen has been something I've only been doing in the last, 6 or 7 years. But my wife told me, she says, look, the kids are married off. We own our home. We own our cars. We don't owe anybody. Form a training company. Give it a try. And if it fails, go be a Walmart greeter. So, I formed a training company and totally expecting it to fail. And I'm getting ready to start my 6th year. And I'm averaging between like 27 and 33 classes a year. And that doesn't include the private stuff I do for law enforcement or for doing a law enforcement training conference or things like that. So it's been very good to me. I'm very blessed.
Right. And I seen, and it looks like your 2017 training calendar is quite extensive. I was on your website earlier over at handguncombatives.com and they're already filling up. I noticed you had several classes that are full now, right?
That are sold out into like May, and I'm already taking not reservations. I'm taking God, I hate it. When you get old, you start losing words. But I'm taking registrations for classes as far out as September and October.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's going very, very well. Now, when I sell out a class though, Merle, you need to understand that I keep my classes small. They're not any larger than 16.
Okay.
Because I like to give as much individual attention as I can. So when I sell out a class, I'm not selling out, a 20, 30, 40 person class. I don't do that. It's if you're in a class, and I've been in those classes where during an 8-hour, 16-hour, or 3-day long program, and the instructor talks to you individually once or twice, I don't think that's a good use of your money.
Right.
I give them as much individual attention as I can.
Right. That's great. Now, you mentioned that you've got this vast experience training law enforcement. I'm sure, do you see that there's a huge difference between training a law enforcement officer and just regular Joe citizen?
Let me think about that. No.
Really?
There's no real difference at all. You need to understand that training someone to shoot a handgun is pretty much the same whether I'm teaching you to shoot it combatively or competitively. There's only so many ways to shoot a handgun. They've all been invented. If there's somebody out there that's telling your students that I've got the latest, greatest Recon Delta, combat focused, whatever the case may be, they're probably BSing you. There's only so many ways to shoot a handgun. They've all been invented probably between about 1840 and 1940. And they all require you to, pick up a pistol and put it between you and your opponent, grip it, depress the trigger, keep the muzzle in alignment. When we go beyond the actual shooting of the handgun into the tactical applications, what I call the combative applications, where there's tactics involved, that's where it varies. And where it varies is in how it's applied, the application part of it. When it comes to the military, they try to kill the enemy from as far away as they can. I don't blame them a bit. In law enforcement, things tend to happen very, very closely because we're not killing the enemy. We're taking bad guys into custody. So when you hear all this stuff, well, vast majority of law enforcement shootings happen within 10 feet. Where else would they happen? Because we're actually going in and trying to put handcuffs on the people. Whereas the armed citizen tends to happen, at 5-6 yards, the length of a car, across a driveway, in a parking lot, because you're not taking people into custody. But as far as the actual drawing the gun from the holster, getting it on target, that stuff's all real similar.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing your history. And I kind of want to move into guns a little bit. If you watch a lot of your videos, I noticed that you carry, and it seems like you prefer a Glock. Is that a true statement, or does that just happen to be the gun you have and that you work with?
I'm not very brand loyal. The Glock 19 is the gun that I tend to prefer these days, but that's been a long road going. When I initially went into law enforcement and really knew nothing about selecting firearms, this gun right here was the first gun I ever owned. As you can see, it's a Smith & Wesson Model 28 Highway Patrolman end frame. Look at this, Merle. As I put it in my hand, I can't hardly reach the trigger.
Right.
But I didn't know anything. I took a recommendation from my wife's stepfather, who was already on the department I went to. He had a Model 28, great gun. I couldn't hardly reach the trigger. I went through the police academy with it, still shot expert, did not really understand how to select a gun that fits me. I quickly changed it to a Model 19, which ended up being a much better choice because I could better reach the trigger. But then we went into pistols in the late 1980s. It was a Smith & Wesson 3rd Gen. From there, I went to a SIG. I had several different SIGs. I had an HK USP Compact for a while when I worked undercover. And now I have a Glock 19 because it does most of the things I want very well, provided I have a grip reduction on it, because the standard Glock grip does not fit me very well. But it does the things I want, but I'm not very brand loyal. If something came along tomorrow that was better, I'd switch.
Right.
But right now, the Glock 19, as you can see, it fills my hand. I don't have any excess hanging off the edge, but it gives me a handful of gun. It's easy to conceal. It's easy to shoot very well. So it's kind of my gun of choice at this time.
Gotcha.
It's been a journey getting there.
Right. And the problem I see is a lot of people, when they go to a gun store, a big box store, like, I don't want to mention names specifically. There's some here in the area. You always run into the guy who seems like, to me, it's like the Glock guy. He's like Glock, 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 Glock. And I don't like those kind of people because they end up talking people into buying a gun, like you said, that may not fit their hand or something they may not be able to shoot personally. And that attitude just kind of drives me crazy in the gun community.
Gee, you don't think that the guy at the gun store is going to try to sell the person the gun they have inside the counter there versus the one they really need, do you? No, they wouldn't do that. It's absolutely. Look here, young lady, all of the guns I have right here really don't fit you very well, so we need to get you something else. Or look, this gun right here that's way too big for you, it'll work just fine. You just need to kind of shift your hand around a little bit. Right. I get it.
Yeah.
It's commerce, but it's not necessarily the best way to prepare someone for armed conflict.
Right. And a lot of people, I think I told you earlier, I carry a full frame 1911. a gun that I shoot very well. I mean, when I shoot this gun, people are like, man, you're really good. And I'm like, well, I'm really not that good. It's the gun, because you put my Glock 17 in my hands and I do the same stuff, and my groups aren't as tight. I just shoot my full frame 1911 really well, but people will give me a hard time because they bought into this thing that, you're not carrying a Glock. You don't have, 17 rounds. You've only got 7 plus what's in the pipe. And I'm like, well, look, I train with my 1911. I carry at least 2 spare mags, if not 3. I train, how to change the mag out if I run empty or if I have a some kind of fault, but they still give me a hard time, and I don't know, it drives me crazy, Dave.
Well, not having to reload in the middle of a gunfight is a good thing. I mean, let's be honest. If your gun runs dry and there's still bullets inbound, that's a crisis.
Right.
No doubt about it. But, you address that by learning how to reload quickly. I mean, I think Jeff Cooper probably said it best. God, I first heard it in the late 1970s. He said there were 3 attributes that were required on a good defensive pistol. It had to be reliable. And I think the major brand of pistols these days are as reliable as human design and engineering can make them. Everything will always break. It needs to have good sights, high visibility sights, which I agree with. It needs to have a good trigger. And that doesn't necessarily mean a light trigger, it means a smooth trigger. And the only thing that I would add to Colonel Cooper's criteria is that it needs to fit. Now, keep in mind, when he said that, there weren't that many pistols. There was 1911s, there were Smith 39s and 59s, there were Browning high powers. So fit wasn't as critical as it is today, because now we have this vast number of handguns. And so fit is popular, or is not popular. It's important. And you've got to get that gun to fit you well. And the interesting thing about many people is they don't, I want to say this in such a way that I'm being fair, I'm not being overly critical. There's a lot of people out there in the firearms community, especially those selling guns to people, that don't really grasp the concept of proper fit. And I think they need to do that, because a gun that is popular may not fit you well. And if it doesn't fit you well, you're not going to shoot it well. Just like this Model 28, I put it in my hand and I get it squared up. Look, I can't hardly get the tip of my finger on it.
Right.
How do you expect me to shoot that gun well? Well, that's another issue, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and that's one, like I said, that's one of the things I struggle with, and I try to encourage that the people that come through my basic pistol classes, don't run out and buy a gun that you've never shot. Try to find somebody who has a gun that you're interested in, rent one at the local range. Don't let the guy behind the counter talk you into buying something that may not fit you, because again, if it doesn't fit you, you don't shoot it well, what's the likelihood that you're going to carry it, right? I mean,
well, I think there's a lot of people go out there because they're gear centric, and gear is easy to talk about and it's fun to deal with, and you can look in the gun magazines and stuff. I started writing for the gun magazines in 1988, and I can remember my first editor telling me, Dave, the photographs should supplement the text. Well, now gun magazines tend to be large picture books with big glossy photographs, and everybody oohs and ahs, and I've got to have that, and this is the latest, greatest thing, and all that kind of stuff. And they go out and they pick their gear before their very first training. Well, unless you've got some type of law enforcement or military or previous shooting experience, how do you know what gear best works for you until you've had some training?
Yeah, right.
That makes no sense to me at all. You would be much better off to borrow someone's gun and go through some training so you would better know what works for you. But that's not near as much fun as going out and buying all this cool guy gear, you know?
Right.
It's like the person that shows up for the first carbine class and they got on a chest plate rig and a frickin' helmet and all this stuff. And then they realize, well, you know what? I didn't need all that gear to take this class. Yeah, you didn't, Skippy. You really didn't.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, like you said, it seems like a thing if you go out on the interwebs. I mean, that's tactical is the thing, right? I mean, I've got to have my 511s and I've got to have this shirt, and people ask you, and I've seen a couple of videos you've done, people won't ask you about a technique. They'll ask you about, I think, the jacket you're wearing, your jacket you're wearing. And that kind of stuff blows me away. And to me, it's only getting worse in the gun community for some reason. I don't know if that's because the people that we're reaching out to are new and they're just sucked in by some of this glamour and glory that they see, or
I don't know if it's video games or internet stuff or I don't know, but I'll give you a real quick story. I don't want to prolong this longer than it has to be, but a number of years back, I was on vacation. My wife and I went up and saw my brother and my sister-in-law, and we're visiting with them, and my wife and sister-in-law were going to go off and do some shopping, and my brother got called into work. So I had a Saturday afternoon that I was kind of like, what am I going to do? I saw this pamphlet for a local one-day pistol training course, and it was $100 or something. It wasn't bad. So, I thought, what the heck, I'll go do it. I'll sign up for it, and I went. And I showed up, and I was wearing a pair of jeans, a pair of Nikes, and a T-shirt. And everyone else there looked like they were at some kind of contractor casual convention. They had on their khaki vests and their boots and their cargo pants and all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking around, and I literally had a guy walk up to me that I found out later was a plumber. Now, I'm not picking on plumbers. Okay, God knows they make a lot of money, and they're very skilled, and if you get a bad one, you know it pretty fast.
right.
But this guy walked up to me and he says, "You do know that there's a certain decorum for a professional firearms training class." I did not know that. Thank you very much. Now, understand, at this time, I had been in law enforcement for 25 years and had probably published, 500 or 600 articles on the subject. But okay. We started to take in the class, and the class was shot on these full-size steel silhouettes. And as long as you rung the plate, you were good. Now, the shots could be 2 feet apart.
Right.
But as long as you were ringing, everybody was just launching bullets and blah, 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 blah. And we got into the class ended with everybody doing an El Presidente. Now, the El Presidentes weren't being done at 10 yards on a certain split, on a 10-inch, the way that Jeff Cooper intended the drill to be shot. The plates were about this far apart. They were huge, and people were spinning around, and they were just launching bullets, and we were getting in some incredible times, and everybody was, this is great, fantastic, I'm awesome. No, you're not. You're not awesome. But I mean, I kept my mouth to. And as we were leaving, I went up to the instructor and I said, "Hey, does it concern you that there really wasn't much shot placement and stuff?" And he looked me square in the eye and he says, "Look, it's a business. If these people don't feel good about themselves when they leave, they don't return." And it dawned on me that, we can either shoot good, look good, or feel good, but we can't do all of them.
Right.
And I'm just like, I got nothing. Wow. Okay, fine. It was basically, it really wasn't a waste of my money because it gave me a really good insight into the shooting community of today, where it's not so much that we truly prepare for armed conflict as well as if we're having a good time and we're shooting real fast and we're feeling good about ourselves and we get to wear our cool guy gear. Everything is awesome.
Right.
I got it.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and it's funny because, and I don't want to beat this to extreme, but it seems like you either got the people that I deal with who want to take my 10-hour class and never take another class, or the guys you're talking about who want to be tactical and take all this SWAT movement and things that they'll never use in a real situation should the, shit hit the fan. You just got those extremes. The guys in the middle are hard to find, or maybe I'm just not running around in the right circles. I don't know.
My problem, I think, in all of this, Merle, is that I'm an old guy and I've been doing this for a long time and I've been researching it for a long time and I got a pretty good handle on what works.
Yeah.
And when I see things done for superfluous reasons, I just can't help but shake my head and think, at some point, this stuff is going to start getting people killed.
Right.
And hopefully we'll have the state of mind to realize let's stop. Yeah. Let's drop back. Let's see what's going on. But if you talk to some Marine that went through the Battle of Fallujah, he'll tell you that there was no cool looking stuff anywhere.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just wonder sometimes if it's like video games. They see this cool looking stuff in these video games and they want to live that fantasy. I don't know. It's just something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And, you know, I quit. I mean, I was wearing 511s before wearing 511s was cool because they were comfortable. They had the pockets I needed. Then all of a sudden they got cool, and I kind of had to, you know, I still wear them, but I kind of got to be careful because people, you know, all of a sudden then start asking me at a class, hey, what pants are you wearing? I'm like, who cares what pants I'm wearing? They're a pair of pants. Wear what you would wear every day.
I was wearing them when they were called Royal Robins.
Oh my gosh.
And they were made in the United States, and they were really good pants, and they were made out of that fire hose type material when nobody knew what they were,
right.
You know, 90s. So, you know, I mean, if I could wear blue jeans and teach my classes, I would, but, right. You know, people expect a certain look.
Yep. They want an image. Yeah. Sad.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, speaking of training, so what does Dave Spaulding's training regiment look like? What does Dave Spaulding? I saw a video, I think you just did a couple of days ago or a week or so ago because it was really cold, and I believe you went out to the local range and you decided to do some training in the not so nice weather.
Well, what I had was a really foggy day, and I posted it on my Facebook. Unfortunately, the photographs didn't show how foggy it was. I didn't understand that phenomenon, but we had gone from a very cold to a very warm day within a few hours, and it created a fog, and then there was a certain mist in the air. And I thought, no, this is an environment I don't get to train in very often. So fortunately, I'm only like 7 or 8 minutes from my gun club, jumped in the car, headed down there, and did some training in that kind of environment because I wanted to see what type of an effect it would have. And you know what? When you're trying to line up your front sight with a target that's way down there and there's fog in the way, that certainly affects things. And of course, then your hands get wet and manipulations and, you know, Kydex starts to stick and things like that. So that's the kind of stuff that I like to do to kind of just keep myself humble. Look, I mean, the whole idea of it ain't raining and you ain't training. If you're standing out in the rain for 3 days, you're going to shut down. And at some point you're going to quit learning. But, you know, you should go and do some training if it's just for an hour in some of this inclement weather, cold, wet, hot, sweaty, nasty, and learn that things will go sideways on you. In my foundational class, what I call combative pistol, at the end of the second day, after we've done all of these various skills and we've worked on them a little bit, and everybody's feeling pretty good about themselves, I cover their hands with baby oil. Oh. And I say, here we go. And it's not, this represents blood, or it doesn't represent anything. It represents your hands not working at their maximum. That's all. And it makes people rethink a little bit about this kind of stuff and some of the complicated, cool looking, fast manipulations that go on. You start pouring baby oil on people's hands, they start realizing, well, this doesn't work all that well. Yeah, it doesn't. You know.
So what other training do you do, Dave? I mean,
well, I focus on the handgun, and it's not that revolvers aren't allowed in my classes. They are. But I'll see one revolver for every 75 pistols.
Wow.
So they're pistol centric and they're related to the handgun. And the reason I don't teach carbine, and the pressure for me to teach a carbine class is immense.
I bet. Yeah.
But I never carried the AR-15. We did not have it. When I was in SWAT, we started out with Ruger Mini 14s, a carbine that I still really like. There's a lot to be said for that. But we moved past those to the Steyr AUG, a gun that I'm not all that hepped up about because it was a bullpup. You couldn't change sides with it and all that. I felt it was a little bit clunky. All the Steyr AUG fans out there are going to be throwing stuff and MFing me and stuff. I just didn't prefer it. Doesn't mean it's not a good gun. I didn't. And then the HK MP5, which is a gun that really liked, still like. That gun shot well. I haven't shot the SIG. I think it's the MPX, but I'm told that it's a very, very user-friendly submachine gun. But the AR-15, the M4 carbine was not something I used. So to me, to start teaching these AR-centric classes would be somewhat disingenuous. And quite frankly, if you want to learn how to shoot the M4 carbine, the AR-15, go to somebody that's got military experience, because that's what they do.
Right.
So I focus on the handgun, and having been an adjunct instructor at places like the old Heckler & Koch International Training Division and the Tactical Defense Institute, John Benner's place down in West Union, Ohio, I wanted to stay away from those type of formats. Not that they're bad formats, but I realized pretty quickly that people, the legally armed citizen, wanted weekend classes, 2 days. So how do I best convey my message in a 2-day format? So instead of doing like level 1, level 2, level 3, or, basic, advanced, super advanced, ninja level, all that kind of stuff, I decided that I would focus on skill sets. So my classes are all skill set based. I teach a 1-day class I call Essential Pistol, and it's basically a lot of how to grip the gun, how to work the trigger, the essential skills. And it doesn't really lead into anything. What I hope it does is it makes people realize, you know what, I suck. I ought to get more training. And then my foundational class, my foundational level program I call Combative Pistol. And it's basically my 3-day course I used to call Handgun Combatives, that my book and my videos are based on. But it was a 3-day class. So I pulled out the mindset lecture and the reduced light thing at night and all that kind of stuff, and pared it down to a 2-day class. And that's my foundational class. That's where people should, in my estimation, begin. But if you already know how to run your gun, you know how to do those foundational type skills, you can actually plug into any one of my classes. Advanced Combative Pistol really isn't advanced. I agree with Bruce Lee, advanced skills are the basic mastered. So my advanced level class is how to move, what I call movement with purpose. It's more than just the typical single sidestep that you see a lot of people. I trained people to move. No, you didn't. You just trained them to move into the path of the bullet. Let's get it. Anyway, how to move forward aggressively, how to move to the rear, how to move sideways and diagonally. That's a 2-day program. And then there's reduced light, which is how to shoot, not just, well, you don't really shoot in darkness. You shoot in inconsistent light because the eyes don't adjust either way. So that type of stuff. My critical space class is kind of an intro to extreme close quarter shooting, and also how to shoot in and around non-hostiles, because there's a real good chance that when you get into your pistol fight, there may be people going, ah, and scream that. Well, how do you not shoot those folks? My adaptive class is, one-handed shooting, unconventional shooting positions. The best thing to do is go on the website and read the course descriptions. But they're all skill sets directed at what I call the combative application of the pistol, how to apply shooting the gun to a fight. And that's how I've broken down my programs.
Right. Nice. So what would you tell the person who went through my basic pistol course? They went out and got their CCW, and now what? I mean, what would you tell them? What Dave Spaulding class should they take to further their knowledge and really acquire skills to handle and carry a pistol?
Well, it would depend on their level of commitment, quite frankly. I went through the CCW class with Merle, and I realized that this was just basically a primer, and I really need a little bit more skill. But you know what? I'm not going to be like the person that goes from gun school to gun school to gun school. I just want a little bit more knowledge. It would be my concealed pistol class.
Okay.
Concealed pistol is a standalone 2-day program that you kind of pick up where your class left off. And it basically is little snippets of all of the other classes I teach directed at that person that's going to get this 2 days, and that's it. I see a lot of those folks.
Nice.
And I'll be quite frankly, concealed pistol, the big message behind concealed pistol is that this is not enough. You need more.
Right.
A lot of people get that message. A lot more do not. But, at least they get an idea of what it's like to shoot from a seated position or to be knocked back on your butt, how to do some garment removal techniques, because, many CCW classes are not done from concealed.
Absolutely.
They're done open, and garment removal does confound the process, especially if you're moving back and forth and now your garment is also moving back and forth. But the fact of the matter is that if you were to truly be prepared to fight with a pistol, you need 7, 8, 10 good solid days of training. Well, who's got the time to go away for that?
Right.
As many people. So, if you want Dave Spaulding's methodology, you will take combative pistol, followed by advanced combative pistol, followed by critical space pistol. Well, now we're up to about 6 days. So follow that with adaptive pistol. Now we're up to about 8 days. Reduced light pistol. Now we're up to 10 days. So you see the progression I'm talking about here? It's skill sets.
Yeah.
And along the way, you'll get all of those skill sets. It would not be unlike going to gun sight and taking 250 and 350 back to back. Now you're up to about 10 days. So things like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because one of the things I try to do, and I told you this earlier, is the people I deal with, they sit through this course and I tell them, look, what I'm giving you is a basic solid foundation. And a lot of the stuff that I teach, because I'm an NRA instructor, comes from the NRA. Not bashing the NRA, and some of the stuff I've taken out is one-handed shooting. I mean, it's kind of geared toward that target. And the people that I'm training aren't there for that. But I try at nauseum, Dave, and sometimes I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, telling them, look, I am giving you a foundation, a solid foundation, and it's really gun safety is really what it is. And unfortunately, the places that we get to do range time on are places that won't allow you to draw from a holster.
Yeah, you go to a public indoor range and you can't shoot any faster than 1 round a second. Right. You got some range Nazis standing behind you. My son-in-law was telling me a story about he was at one of those public indoor ranges and they jumped his crap because he was using the wrong target and it would foul up the ventilation system and all this. I mean, there are certain people that they're just hovering over you looking to jump on your back about something. But, you can't draw from the holster. You can't go to a kneeling position. You can't shoot. I mean, what good is that?
Right.
I mean, you can't even get good trigger control because you're going, bam. What good is it to go, bam, put the gun down, pick it up, bam, put the gun down. And it's liability. I'm concerned they got insurance and all that kind of stuff, but I got nothing for that.
Right.
I'm glad that that's not my real world of work. That's not my practice regimen. The thing to do would be go join a gun club that'll allow you to do some real world stuff like the one that I belong to.
Right.
So
somebody like you, Dave, who do you follow? Who are some of the gun people that you look up to?
Oh, God. There was a time, Merle, that I felt like I had a good handle on it. I had been to most of the major shooting schools. You got to remember there wasn't very many at the time. I can remember back as early as about 1990, 92, there was Gun Sight, there was Mid-South, there was the Smith & Wesson Academy, and there was just very few fixed facilities, and I had been to those. The traveling instructors like Mas Ayub and John Farnham and Ken Hackathorn and those guys, I had been to them. And then after 9/11, there was an explosion of people coming out of the military who filled the training world, and now we've got so many former military types, and like at your level, we've got so many guys going through NRA instructor school, and they want to put their shingle out, and we have just had this explosion of instructors. It's made me realize I just can't keep up. I can't keep up with everybody that's out there. I did a thing recently. Actually, it was back in April, but it just became public, called the Shooter Summit. That was a format like this that was done on Skype. And he had a number of instructors out there that I had never heard of. So since I've been in my, winter hiatus from my training classes, I've been watching a lot of those folks. And I try to catch up a lot with stuff that's on YouTube and things like that. And I hate to commit too much stuff to the online stuff because there's crazy people out there on YouTube that are advocating this stuff, and I'll start a video and I'll watch this guy and I'll be like, this guy is absolutely insane. So I've stayed clear of a lot of that kind of stuff, but I do want to know what's being said out there. It's just it tries my patience. But I followed Jeff Cooper for a long time, followed Mas Ayub, Ken Hackathorn, John Farnham, a lot of what people would call the old guys. They've been around a long time. And then some of the newer, I hate to call them younger guys, because some of these guys are in their late 40s and 50s. They're not exactly young guys. They're young compared to me. But some of the folks that I have been kind of watching, I find Travis Haley kind of interesting. And of course, there's people that love, there's people that hate him. The thing I like about Mr. Haley is that he looks at the science behind some of this stuff, the sports physiology. People say the science of gunfighting. There's no science to gunfighting. The reason there's no science to it because each gunfight varies so much. It's too situationally dependent. But much of what I do my training comes from sports physiology, from motor learning and performance, from how people move and how that kind of stuff. And then I find that Mr. Haley does a lot of that same kind of stuff. And as far as what goes into human motion, the psychology of what happens in the brain. So, I kind of watch some of the stuff that he's done. I've never met him, don't know anything about him other than on his videos. So I look at some of his stuff. I like Frank Proctor from Way of the Gun. He, a former special operations guy who combines what he calls performance shooting, the practical side from like USPSA and things like that. And a lot of the things he say make sense to me. And I guess when I watch these people, if the stuff they say doesn't make sense to me based on my background, my experience, my research, then I shove them off to the side. Right. So I guess I'm looking for stuff, not so much I'm not looking for people who agree with me.
Sure.
I don't mind that people disagree with me, but I'm looking for that disagreement to be based somewhat in reality. I'm not looking for a guy who teaches something that's basically licensed to suck but feel good about. I'm not looking for those kind of things. So there's a lot of really good information out there, more than I can possibly keep up with. But the thing that I'll tell you, and the reason that I have the attitude I do, is that what I teach has been a long time coming. When I went through the Basic Police Academy in 1976, we went through a 40-hour block of firearms instruction that basically was directed at passing the practical pistol course, the PPC. And a lot of it did not make sense to me even that far back. I didn't see how it was gunfight related. So I began a lifelong journey, so to speak, of talking to everyone that I could who had been in some type of gunfight. And my father started that. My father was in the Navy in World War II. It was at Iwo Jima, drove landing craft. And when I mentioned to him one time, I said, Dad, I wish I could talk to somebody who'd been in a gunfight. He says, go down to the Legion Hall, son. There's lots of them.
Right.
Got to remember, the guys in World War II were only in their 50s then. They were younger than I am now. And I went down there, and my very first interview was a guy who had been in the trench warfare of World War I. And he sat there for an hour and a half, and he told me what it was like not only to fight in the trenches, but fight in the tunnels of World War I. And I became fascinated. And over the next 30 plus years, I talked to everyone I could. And it was not thousands, but hundreds of people. Well, there's a whole lot more than a couple of hundred. Well, listen, Skippy, you take the time, effort, and money to go out and try to run these people down and talk to them and see how well you do. It's not as instant as it is now on YouTube, right, that you can just find all this information. It was a long time coming. And along the way, as I talked to these people and I compared it to the experiences that I faced in law enforcement, and I had some experiences, and then meshed that with my training and all these things, I came up with a methodology to do this. And along the way, my methodology and what I learned and what I had been taught and what I had seen did not necessarily jive with what was in at the time. And I had to dispense with a lot of that stuff. I remember there was a book that came out about in the mid 1990s called Sharpening the Warrior's Edge. And it was cutting edge at the time. And it basically, it said, the loss of digital dexterity, you won't be able to do certain things and you won't be able to see the sights on your gun and all this kind of stuff. And it was written by a fellow named Bruce Siddle, who was at the time was the iconic instructor of the period. We didn't have the social media that we have now. You saw videos and you saw books and you read a lot. And I can remember reading that book, and I'm not trying to poo-poo the book. Don't misunderstand, because it was the technology, or it was the research of the time. But I can remember reading some of that stuff and it not jiving with some of the things that I had learned in my interviews. Case in point was the loss of digital dexterity and the things that you will not be able to do in the middle of a fight. And I was, not too long after I read that, I was interviewing a World War II veteran of the Battle of the Bulge. And he was telling me what it was like to fight and use the M1 Garand and all this kind of stuff. And I brought this new research to his attention, and he looks at me and goes, "Sonny, I really don't know what to tell you about that book you just read. The only thing that I can tell you is that when my M1 Garand ran out of bullets and went bling, the bullets were chipping off the wall that I was behind and flying past me. And you know what? If I didn't get that stripper clip out of my pouch and I didn't get it lined up with that receiver and I didn't push down on it and I didn't work that bolt, I was going to die."
Right.
So there was a whole lot of motivation to get all those motor skills together and make them work. So I was like, wow, maybe he hadn't read all that research.
Right. Wow. Interesting.
So that's kind of a long-winded version of how I looked at all this kind of stuff. And, the thing now these days with many instructors is, I've had so many students that have been involved in gunfights. I've got a lot. I've been training cops since 1983, and you get a lot of people who have been in gunfights. And they've gotten back to me, and a number of them have been on video.
Wow.
And when you have that kind of feedback, you're pretty sure you got it right.
Right.
So as I look at the new generation instructors come along and the stuff that they expound, I look back on my 40 years of this and I say, does this jive with what I know? And if it doesn't, then I throw it out.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry to be so long-winded.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm trying. I want people to get into the mind of Dave Spaulding. So that's fantastic.
The mind of Dave Spaulding doesn't necessarily jive with the mind of a lot of the younger, newer guys that are coming along.
Yeah.
Let me think about that for a minute. Yeah, I don't care.
Right. Yeah. And and that's unfortunate. And that's why I like, and I will say older guys, like you're an older guy, but I say that with respect, because I agree with you. I mean, and I'm no young guy, I'm 46, but what I'm seeing today.
You're a kid. I'm sorry.
Thank you. But I see guys today who they buy into this tactical thing and they preach these things that, and again, I think I've heard you say it, don't mistake YouTube videos as training. It might be good information, but it's not training. But they take what they hear off the internet and they think it's reality, and they start applying it, teaching people this stuff, and it doesn't do these people any good. They're giving them, I think, like false hope and information that just might not help them.
Well, reality sucks in that it isn't always what we want it to be. And there's so many people out there that are training with firearms and they're doing all this flashy, cool looking stuff. And they got this idea of how it's going to apply to their gunfight. And that may not be the case. I hate to use the old worn out term of it is what it is, but it's appropriate. Right. Reality is what it is and it's nothing else. And your gunfight may not be what you want it to be.
Right.
That's just the way it's going to be. And you need to be able to adapt based on the circumstances at hand. And that really in the long run is the person that's going to win the gunfight.
Right.
And when we talk gunfight. We're talking about pistol fighting.
Yeah.
We're talking about pistol fighting, which is very, very close. It's very, very furious. It's over fairly quickly. It's not like a rifle fight that may take place at a couple hundred yards.
Right.
It's something where, you're looking at each other.
Yeah.
And it's going to be boom, boom, boom. It's going to be over. Maybe one or both of you are going to be down or shot or injured. There isn't a lot of time to really think about things. You just have to do. And what I have realized over the years is it's not the person that can do the fastest reload or has the quickest draw or can shoot the tightest splits. It's the person that has the wherewithal, the state of mind, the mindset, the killing ability to actually stand there and go at it.
Yeah.
What Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson and people like that called deliberation. And what we're talking about is the person that will deliberately go into the fight and do it anyway, knowing that they could die.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the thing that's going to win. I think Kelly McCann, who is a very noted trainer, said it best. It's about 10% ability and about 90% attitude.
Yeah.
And the person that may not be the best shot in the world, but it's the kind of person that will jump on the bad guy's back and bite your ear off and poke him in the eye and do that kind of stuff is probably the one that's going to win. It's not going to be necessarily the captain of the pistol team.
Yeah. And I think that goes along. I think you were quoted as saying, I got it off your website earlier, is the difference between competition and combat is rules. There are no rules in a gunfight. So if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough to win.
Well, yeah, and then I've actually had people take me to task. Well, if there's no rules, just people think way too hard. Yeah, there are no rules to a fight. I mean, let's face it. There's an old movie out there. Maybe a lot of people don't know about it, but it was called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Right, my wife's favorite movie.
Yeah, and there's a scene very early on when Harvey Logan wants to take the command of the Hole in the Wall gang away from Butch Cassidy. And they're getting ready to square off in this fight. And he pulls out this big knife and all this. And Butch Cassidy, played by Paul Newman, walks up to him and says, now, look, let's establish some rules here. Harvey Logan, who was played by the guy that played Lurch in the old Addams Family, he's a big, huge guy, says, rules, there's no rules. And the next thing he does is he hauls off and kicks him right in the nuts. Boom, down he goes. And he says, okay, no rules. That is the perfect cineramic version of a fight. There's no rules.
Right.
There are no rules. I mean, let's face it. While in high school, if you're getting ready to square off, the first thing you do is you haul off and you kick him in the knee. It's done.
Right. Right.
There are no rules in a fight, and it's going to be the guy that's got the most killer instinct that's going to win that. And the fact is, most people don't have that. Right. Because most people have never been in a fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's we all have to be an active participant in our own rescue, and that's going to be the person that is both ready and willing to do the distasteful that will prevail in conflict.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why in my class, because I know that they're not getting the skills that I think they need in order to carry this gun. I focus a lot on mindset and situational awareness and things, because I have a saying, Dave, and you may or may not agree with this, but the only gunfight you ever truly win is the one you're not in. And I try to get people to that state to where, hey, if you can avoid a gunfight, do it at all in every cost possible. There's nothing wrong with finding the back door with your loved ones and bailing out.
I have a number of friends who have been or still in the intelligence community. And within spycraft, they have what was related to me as the hierarchy of threat management. And it goes in this order: avoid. Because, unlike the movies, people who are involved in espionage, they don't get into gunfights. They don't save the world. They're trying to gather information, and they're trying to gather that information as low key as possible so that you don't know they're there. So if it looks like there's going to be some sort of a problem, you avoid it.
Right.
If you can't avoid it, you evade it. You're walking down the street and you see a group of bad guys, guys looking at you that look like they're going to be trouble. You go across the street. You go the other way. You evade it. And the third thing is counter. And you only counter the threat if you can't avoid or evade it. But when you do counter it, you counter it with great enthusiasm. And that's a level of enthusiasm that many people do not possess. The problem is they don't realize it until the threat comes.
Right. Yeah. And and that's a good point. That's something we teach. I'm an ALICE instructor. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's basically dealing with an active shooter when you don't have a gun, right? So we talk about avoid, evade, counter. And there are a lot of people in this community, Dave, who, and I've seen some of their YouTube videos, who have basically said, you're a wuss if there's like an active shooter and you're in a restaurant with your loved ones and you don't engage that person. And I always tell people, look, Merle Cox, it is my duty to protect me and my loved ones. That's it. I'm not a sworn law enforcement officer. My duty at that time is me and my loved ones. Now, if my loved ones aren't there, I have a wife and kid that I want to go home to. Depending on the situation, I may or may not get involved. But there are some people in our community who would call me a wuss.
Those type of people are the people that have never faced conflict, and they're probably living on some sort of a fantasy. Anybody that's actually ever been in a situation where they faced serious physical injury that could lead to death would probably talk very differently about that. When it comes to the active killer, the mass shooter, whatever the case may be, I think we all need to have a line in the sand at what point we will and we will not engage. Now, I happen to agree with you. My primary concern is going to be the protection of myself and my loved ones. Boom, right there. That's going to be it. And for me, that will be to leave the scene.
Right.
I won't engage unless I have to. That said, my line in the sand is children.
Yes.
If there are children in the line of fire that are going to be facing harm or death, then I will engage. I made that decision a long time ago that they're worth dying for. Yeah. So I will do that. This may sound cruel, mean, and heartless, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. If there's some 90-year-old person sitting in a wheelchair sucking on an air tank, will I give up my life or endanger my family for them? Probably not.
Right.
They had their chance.
Right.
Their life is almost over. So, we have to draw a line in the sand, and my line in the sand would be children. So, but as a general rule, I agree with you. My goal is to evacuate me and my loved ones and get them out of harm's way.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people that I talk to, because I like to train, and I'm constantly, if I'm not at the range, I'm dry firing here, and I've had people, Dave, say stupid stuff to me like, "Man, I bet you can't wait to get in a gunfight." And I'm like, "Look, I don't ever want to be in a gunfight. I train for it, but I said one thing you got to remember is if I have to do it, the guy who I'm dealing with probably hasn't trained as much as me, but think about this: he might be having the best day he's ever had, and I can be off just a little bit." I may not come out of it. So I want to avoid it at all costs possible. But I don't know where this cowboy mentality comes from people when they talk to people like us. They think that we're just ready to go out and combat the world.
Well, comedian Ron White was correct when he made the statement, "You can't fix stupid." And there are some people out there that are stupid, but there's some people that are ill-informed because they have that fantasy view of what a gunfight's going to be.
Right.
I would counter that with anytime you enter conflict, you always run the risk of losing. Yeah. And I'll give you a case in point. There was a movie out there a number of years ago called Act of Valor.
Yes.
That was based on Navy SEALs, and it had actual real SEALs that were in the movie and all that kind of stuff. It was a pretty good action film. But at the very end of the movie, before the credits started to run, they had a list of all of the Navy SEALs who had been killed since 9/11. It was a long list. Now, let's face it. Those SEALs they all didn't face people of superior skill. As a matter of fact, they were probably killed by conscripts,
right,
who just got lucky. Because anytime you enter conflict, you run the risk of losing.
Yep.
Regardless of your skill level, because things happen. So the idea that just because you've had all this training, you're going to go and do this and you're going to prevail doesn't necessarily mean that that's correct, because luck is a factor. And if the person you're facing just happens to be luckier than you that day, you're probably going to perish. And also keep in mind that because we wear the white hat, we're the good guys, we seldom will be on the offense. We're going to be reacting to the actions of someone else, which means they're already ahead of the power curve, which means you have to play catch up. And that is a huge advantage on their part. So anyone who goes through a knife fighting class that wants to go out and get in a knife fight, or they go into a gunfighting class, they want to go out and get in a gunfight, that would be my definition of stupid.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. So let's switch gears a little bit. You held up a book earlier that you said we could talk about. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this right here is the FBI's Transitional Pistol Program. It's dated May 2nd, 1990. And this was probably the original pistol training course for law enforcement, because law enforcement follows a lot of what the FBI does. That can be good and that can be bad. But you have to realize that when American law enforcement went from revolvers to pistols, we were in uncharted territory for a lot of it. We really didn't know how to train people with the semi-automatic pistol. And if you looked at the military, much of what they did with the pistol was familiarization fire, just basically marksmanship. Yep. So a lot of this stuff was along the way. And what made me bring this up was that there has been a lot being stated these days about trigger control and trigger control of the pistol. And if you go on the internet and you look at a lot of the stuff, what is going after is basically what they call shooting to reset or pull and pin the trigger to the rear and all of this kind of stuff. And what we're talking about here is, let me break out my little Glock here. As you can see, it's empty. So what we're talking about is when you engage the trigger and you depress it straight to the rear. Now, depressing that trigger straight to the rear is a taller order than a lot of people think.
Right.
The reason being that is because what happens is that you're trying to separate this finger from the rest of your hand. It's not designed to do that. Your hand is designed for 4 fingers to oppose a thumb. And now for you to reach out and isolate this without doing that is huge. And the longer that trigger is, the more difficult it is. And we'll go back here to my my revolver. As you can see, I've got to actually shift my hand around so I can get my finger on it. We have got to depress that trigger, and then we've got to let it all the way back out again, and we got to depress it again. Well, the farther out this finger travels, the more likely that the other fingers are going to sympathetically follow it. You with me so far?
Yes, sir.
So what we want to do is we want to try to keep this finger's motion as minimal as possible, which brings us to your preferred pistol.
Yes, sir.
The 1911. Because the 1911 is the only sliding trigger in existence. All of the rest of them pivot from the top. Okay? Well, that's what makes that gun so easy to shoot, because if you can see, look where my finger is in relationship to the others.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the reset is
not a lot of movement there.
Not a lot of movement there versus this.
Yeah. A lot of movement there.
A lot of difference. Well, keep in mind, we were going from this to the pistol, and we're not talking about the Glock initially. We're talking about double action, single action, transition, where the first trigger you fired was like this, but then the subsequent ones were like this. So what the FBI created was called shooting to reset. And if I can, I was going to try to find the actual lesson plan here. But what they basically tried to teach people was to shoot to reset. And what they were trying to do is that you fired the first long one, the gun recoiled, you held the trigger back against the frame, you let it out to reset, and you pressed it again. Well, like so many things, that got corrupted. and people were actually trying to fire the gun. Boom, let it cycle, let it out. It's too slow. What you need to be able to do is you need to be setting up the next trigger while you're actually in reset, or what in recoil, while you're in recoil. So basically what it would look like trying to do it slowly is you would be firing the gun as it's recoiling. You're literally letting it out. So when it settles out, you're ready to shoot again. Could you see that?
Yeah.
Hard to do.
Yeah.
Hard to do. Easier to do with a 1911. Really difficult to do with a double action, single action transition. So what people now are calling pull and pin or shooting to reset was trying to get shooters to be minimal on the trigger versus this, which was very, very, very common because people really didn't commit to it. So what you would have when they were shooting the revolvers, they would do things like, well, you can see what this finger's doing.
Right.
Well, as you can see with this, when I press that pinky finger, what's doing to the muzzle?
Yep, it's going up and down.
Yeah, it's going up and down, or it could be doing sideways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to kind of point this at the screen so people would see what I'm talking about.
Right.
But with the pistol, what happens when they depress that hand? Where's it go?
Yeah.
If I'm right-handed, it goes low left, 7 o'clock. Do you know what 1/8 of an inch of muzzle movement is at 20 feet?
Yeah, that arc of movement that's a miss, right?
4 inches.
Yeah, that could be a miss.
So now when I'm trying to hit somebody a relatively small area, I'm out here. Well, if you get someone who's like what we call milking the grip, and if you're from Ohio, so if you ever milked a cow,
right,
you squeeze the teat and pull down on it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you see a lot of people doing. That's why people are shooting target stands at 15 feet.
Right.
Because they're doing this, because that's the way their hand's designed to work.
Right.
So what the FBI was trying to do with working the reset is they were trying to get people to be minimal on the trigger. It was never intended to be a method to shoot.
Oh.
It was trying to get them to do this versus do this.
Wow.
So, and I had to find this old manual. I wish I would have had it on some of my other interviews. I would have been able to explain the history of the technique to some of the folks who weren't around back in those days. We do so many things in an effort to introduce technique that suddenly becomes doctrine, and
right.
It was never intended to be that way. Ken Hackathorn's original box drill, he was trying to separate people's feet from their hands to let them know that you can shoot the gun and move. So you went forward, you went sideways, you went back. It was never intended to be a tactic of how you would move in a gunfight, but you know what? It became that.
Yeah. Wow.
And things get corrupted. And a lot of times things get corrupted because instructors are looking for something new to teach to be different.
Right.
They really don't understand the methodology or the reasons behind the technique they're teaching.
Yeah. So, that brings up an interesting point. And for guys like me who aren't teaching at your level, we're teaching new shooters. What would your advice be? Because we do have some latitude on the things that we can and can't teach. If you had a new shooter come into your class and they said, "Hey, I've been through Merle Cox's concealed carry class. I did all the paperwork. The state of Ohio has granted me the privilege to carry concealed." What shooter do you want? I guess what skills in a shooter would you like me to teach these people before they get to you?
Well, if you can master grip and trigger control, that would be great. You're not going to do it.
Right.
Not in a 10-hour class with all of the things that the state mandates for you to do, because I haven't taught the basic CCW class in a while, and I know it's changed, but it used to be more about safety than it was about being able to shoot a gun.
Right. Still is.
Still the case?
Yep, still is.
Yeah, it was more about being safety, so people didn't do things like this. Oh, yep, the gun's empty.
Right.
I've seen that.
Yeah. We're gonna get hate from the trolls for that too, right? You know that.
Well, as you can see, I popped the cylinder open.
Oh, they're still gonna hate you. They're still gonna hate us.
Seen that.
Right.
Let's face it, it's a lot more graphic for me to do this here on camera with the cylinder open,
right,
than to tell people that there's folks that look down the barrel.
Right.
Well, that doesn't happen. It does happen. I've seen it. I've seen it done.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that is what you are combating in the basic CCW class. And God bless you guys for doing it. I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
What I want them to do is to be able to do safe manipulations.
Okay.
If you can get them to do safe manipulations so they don't do crazy stuff like that, or they're on the range and they're going, "Hey, what's wrong with that kind of stuff?"
Right.
if you can get them to do safe manipulations, I'll be a happy guy. Because the first thing that I do is I put them at 3 yards, 10 feet, whatever, and I have them shoot at a 3x5 card.
Okay.
And I'm basically looking for this kind of stuff, because then we start the process of isolating the index finger and getting a secure grip and showing them how to grip properly, and things like that. And we take it from there. And basically my 1-day essential pistol class, that's kind of what that is. It's a lot of, getting people when they got the gun and they're not doing something like, cup and saucer. They're rolling the hand up in it. We're showing them how to marry the palms at the rear, how to properly control the recoil by using the fingers to cam down the front strap, things like that, and get them to do that. And if I can get them to grip it and isolate the finger to a certain extent, say back to like 20 feet, then I've done a lot in the essential pistol course, because then in combative pistol, we go from there. So I guess safe manipulation of the pistol, so they know how to insert the magazine, how to work the slide. Right. That's the kind of stuff that guys at your level, if I can, and that's the kind of stuff I have no patience for. So God bless you for doing it. So if you guys can do that kind of stuff so that people don't hurt themselves with the gun, then you've done a huge service to that future shooter.
Fantastic. And I appreciate that, because that's one thing, I mean, I take seriously, of course, is in my goal when I do it, because I know I don't have the time to send them out with the skills that they need, or at least I don't think they, the skills they need to effectively deploy a handgun is, I know most of these people are going to spend their time on their range, so I teach them, because a lot of these people have never been to a range and they don't understand the firing line. I had a guy at one of the state ranges, as I was waiting for a class, he was doing all of his gun work, taking it out of the case behind the fire line, and I finally went over to him. I said, "Hey, look," I said, "Man, you pointed that gun at me like 10 times. I said, do me a favor, close that case up, walk up to what we'll call your workspace, on the right side of the firing line, and let's do all that there, and let's keep that muzzle pointed down range." And he was very appreciative, and he's like, "Hey, thanks. Nobody's ever really told me, what the proper etiquette is and safety." And I'm like, "Okay, well, now so let's practice that, and let's all leave here, safe and alive."
See, that's the kind of stuff that I want guys at your level to do.
Okay.
Because, let's face it, as you go higher and higher up in that training hierarchy and you start getting better, there are some things that are that need to be done behind the line, so that we can keep the class rolling. But I need them to know what that etiquette, for lack of a better term, is, so that they can do that kind of stuff. Let's face it, if there's a stoppage, being able to lock the gun open and put it in your hand like this, and then walk back behind the line so we can go to a fiddle table or whatever. Sometimes you just have to do that to kind of keep things going. Yeah. But, if you're walking around and you got the gun in your hand like this, it's not going to shoot anybody.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There are some trolls out there. You should never have the gun out behind the line.
Right.
Sometimes you got to, Skippy, in order to keep things rolling.
Right.
If you got the gun like this, or in the case of a revolver, the cylinder's open and you got your fingers inside the frame, pretty sure that gun's not going to shoot me.
Right.
So, let's face it. But, you need to advance along in your journey that is called training.
Yeah.
To get to that level.
Yeah, great. Well, look, we've been at this an hour and 15 minutes, and I know you're a busy man. You're not traveling until after the first of the year, getting on what you call the metallic tube of death. So, just some parting words, some thoughts from Dave Spaulding. What do you see in the future of gun training and people and guns in general?
Hopefully we'll move back from some of this flashy looking tactical stuff to back to the stuff that works. It's really what I want to say. It's not the person that, again, can do all those cool looking skills that will win a gunfight. It's the person that recognizes the situation for what it is, and it can adapt the most quickly. Now what is adapt? Adapt is defined as to change as necessary. To be adaptive means you have the ability to change as necessary. Well, what is it you're adapting in the middle of a gunfight? It's those foundational skills. It's being able to draw from the holster, get a good grip on the gun, control the trigger, move from target to target. It's being able to know which of those skills that you have to draw upon and now apply to this problem. And that's not something you're going to get in a 2-day gun school. That is a journey of discovery, and that's what training is. It's a journey of discovery. If you are serious about your personal security and the security of your family, you will seek out quality training and you will practice. Merle, it surprises me the number of people that go to a practice, to a training course, and they get pretty good at it, and then they don't practice for the next 8 months.
Right.
And then they go to the range and they wonder why they can't shoot at the level they did.
Yeah.
It's not really a perishable skill. To perish means to go away, but it deteriorates. The skills do deteriorate to a certain level, and you need to keep them sharp, just like driving or swinging a bat at a ball or anything like that. You need to practice those things. And it doesn't require a lot. You dry fire practice, 5 or, people say, well, don't call it dry fire because you're not really, oh, God. Okay, dry practice. Okay, so you dry practice 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day. Today, you work on drawing from the holster for 5 minutes. Tomorrow, you work on, trigger control for 5 minutes. And the next day, you work on reloading for 5 minutes. If you do that and then get to the range every month and shoot 100 rounds, you'd be surprised how prepared you can be.
Yeah.
But it's a commitment. It is a commitment of your time and effort. But you know what? Isn't anything worth doing a commitment?
Absolutely. Yep.
So,
well, Dave,
it's my motto. You got to be an active participant in your own rescue. You can't call 911. If you've got 3-minute, 5-minute response time in your town, that's outstanding in an event that's going to last, 5-10 seconds.
Right. Yeah. So tell the people where they can get more information about you, because you've got this fantastic website with a storefront now.
My son will be so appreciative of you because, Merle, I know nothing about social media. I know nothing about computers. Anybody that knows anything should know that you had to walk me through getting signed on here today. So it's www.handguncombatives.com. And that was the name of my book. It was the name of my videos. It's not just a catchy name. It is what I consider kind of a lifestyle commitment. Yeah. Combative is defined as ready and willing to fight. And what we're trying to do is to make you ready and willing to fight with a handgun. That's what handgun combatives mean. If you want to get in touch with me, believe it or not, it's handguncombatives@gmail.com. Right. And the Facebook, the business Facebook, I beat both my personal and my business Facebook are under the name Dave Spaulding. But, my business Facebook can be reached from my website. Right. So click on that, because we do a lot of my wife has told me it's not really a business Facebook anymore. It's kind of a gun forum. we try to educate people on there. We try to post stuff every day. We try to get people to come in and interact. The only thing I ask you to do, even if you want to disagree, do it professionally. Right. Don't be I hate to use the term, but don't be a dickweed.
Right.
So, come in and be a professional and dissent or exchange information, because the one thing technology wise I do know how to do is delete and ban.
Right.
So, but you want to come in there and participate, we appreciate it.
Yeah. And don't forget, you actually have an Instagram account too. And it's nice to follow you on Instagram, because actually when you're out in some of your classes, you will post video and pictures of what's going on in your class.
Yeah, that's the one thing I kind of know how to do too, to do the Instagram.
Yeah.
I tried to find that online. You can't do that. You got to do it on your cell phone.
Yeah.
That's not something I understood when
Right.
I started out.
Right.
But, my son-in-law, Darren, is a marketing guy at a major plumbing wholesaler, and he helps me with the marketing because I really don't know anything about that. My son does my web presence. Yep. My wife and daughter tell me when I'm being stupid. So, and my wife is the great humbler. She's the one that keeps the head down. Right. It's a team effort. So, and there is a web store, just a few products that I'm associated with. Right. And the thing about the web store is it's always in stock.
Nice.
Yeah, it's always in stock.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Dave, I really appreciate you taking the time. You've been nothing but a great person to interview and talk to. You're fascinating. I could literally sit here and talk to you all day because it's fascinating, your stories. And
people haven't got that much attention span, to sit here and watch us for an hour and something is going to take quite a commitment. Right. I'm learning about YouTube that if I don't keep the videos to about 5 minutes, people don't watch them.
Right. Yeah. They've got the attention span of circus monkeys.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say that, but some people are busy and some people just don't want to do it. So.
Right. Well, I'm definitely, Dave, going to try to get out. You got a couple of classes here. I definitely want to get out to one of your classes this year. I'm going to make that a priority because how long do you think you're going to be doing this, Dave? I mean,
probably not a lot longer.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a young man. I mean, if I went to the academy in 1976, that makes me 61 years old. I still like doing it, but it's the travel that gets to mind, the metallic tube of death, which is air travel, and you're truly at their disposal because you don't know if you're going to get stuck or not.
Right.
You never get stuck where you start or where you end. You always get stuck at the layover in the middle.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, I made the decision that when I could no longer shoot my standards, it was time to stop. But, how much longer can you do that? I put a video up of Ken Hackathorn at the age of 70, still shooting pretty darn good.
Right.
So, I'm going to continue to do it as long as I think I can be relevant. But, at some point it's going to come time to stop.
Right. So is it possible? I mean, you talk about your son-in-law, Darren, is that right? Mm-hmm. Is he, I mean, I've seen him in a few videos. I mean, is he maybe going to take over the father-in-law's business someday or? I don't
think so. There's not enough money in it. This stuff's a labor of love.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the fact that I had a police pension and all that, I don't know if I had the nerve to do this.
Yeah.
But it's still fun.
Yeah.
I hate the travel, but when I get there, I sure like the students.
Right.
I really like doing it. And I really like the fact that they listen. Every once in a while, you'll get a tactard that'll be in there that will want to challenge you on stuff. Well, okay, Skippy, get up here and shoot. Let me see what you can do. Most of the time that doesn't end up being much of anything, but I really do like the students and I really like that part of it.
Right. Well, we definitely appreciate it. You're definitely providing a service and I appreciate your knowledge and the time that you put into this. Cause like you said, I mean, you can't make a living. Thank God you got a pension to fall back on doing this, but it's important. And hopefully, one of the reasons I want to sit down and do this, I want to show my students that they need more training, that there is a mindset. There's things that they got to think about beyond the 10-hour class that they got. So you've definitely, I think, given me some information that I can put in front of them that will definitely change hearts and minds. And I do appreciate that. And, if you ever want to just sit down and talk guns, let me know because I love to sit down and talk guns. And I always, I'm always willing to learn. And every time I've seen so many of your videos, I think I've seen every video, Dave, that you've made, but you always teach me something and I appreciate that.
I'm glad it's not going to waste.
Yeah. Thanks. So for all the people out there who are listening, I appreciate the downloads. Like I said, we're rebranding here at Beavercreek Tactical. Do yourself a favor, go over and check Dave's website out. He's got a cool little store, especially if you own a Glock. He's got some great sights. Dave, I put your sights on my Glock. First thing I did. So I appreciate it. But check us out over at www.mcprodnet.com. You'll see all the podcasts that we do. Leave some feedback and let us know what you think. And in the future, we're going to try to do some more of this type of work. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Take care now.